Hi, class. Okay, today we are going to talk about classification of sponges. So, phylum Porifera is broken down into four distinct classes. These classes are separated by the composition of their internal skeleton. And remember, when we refer to skeleton in a sponge, this can be made of either spongin or spicules, which could be calcium carbonate or that silica structure as well. The first class we're going to talk about happens to be the most diverse, and this is class Dimospongiae. Okay, this contains about 90% of all living sponges, which includes all of the freshwater sponges. They have spongin in their skeleton, and they may or may not have that silica spicule, depending on which type of organism you're looking at within this class. So a memory hook to help you remember this class, think demo diverse. Okay, demo is diverse. The class name also has the word sponge in it, so that would help because this is the class with the most sponges. So this is the only class that actually has that spongin internal skeleton. The soft sponges that have been used for bathing and cleaning are from this class. Second class we're going to talk about, this is class Hexactinellata. Okay, these are glass sponges. They are strong. They have a lattice-like skeleton of fused silica spicules, which you can kind of see looking in here, right? They kind of almost look like they're woven together. So think about this one, hexa. So their spicules have 6 points to them, which is partly how they got their name. And this class does not have spongin in the internal skeleton. Another up-close picture of that kind of woven structure. You can see that lattice detail that it has, and all those spicules put together that make it more hard or glass-like. Can come in a variety of shapes, sizes, structures. So I just want to show you a couple of them. So we kind of saw that lattice structure. Here's another example of a sponge from this class that kind of has that glass appearance. Here's another one you can see, right? Very different in the structure that they have, but still made of the spicules put together and no spongin. Another variety for you to see. This is probably more classic what you think when you think of a sponge that we've been looking at in class. All right, our third class we're going to talk about is class Calcarea. This one has spicules as well, but they are made of calcium carbonate, and these ones are only found in shallow marine waters. So these are actually the only sponges that have calcium carbonate spicules, which is partly how they got their name. So again, remember, no spongin, yes spicules, but it's calcium carbonate instead of silica. Here is an example of one. You can kind of see they still have that more hard shape than the first class of sponges we looked at that was full of the spongin, but a little bit different than those glass-like ones we looked at in our second class. Fourth class is class Homosclera morpha. Okay, this is the rarest, also the simplest class, and they have recently identified about 110 species. So this would include encrusting sponges, and encrusting just means they crust over a surface. So they can be helpful to bind an area in a coral reef together, but also have been known to grow over and kill coral as well. And these have small, simple silica spicules. Here would be another example where you can kind of see that encrusting happening, and it's starting to kind of grow over or crust over. Okay. Next thing we're going to talk about is the impact sponges have on their ecosystem. So sponges can have a significant impact. They filter water, right, which is how we learned. They do that quite frequently just to get the food that they need. And they also recycle organic matter. So they're kind of like the mushrooms of the ocean. They take all of that waste and they make food out of it, which in turn filters that water supply. They also provide shelter. So they shelter other organisms such as invertebrates and small fish. They can provide them with protection from certain predators. They also provide them with a safe place for many to lay their eggs, so to help in reproduction. There is one sponge specimen, which is over 2 meters tall, that was found with over 16,000 shrimp inside of it. Another had over 100 different species living within. So you can see in the image there's a barrel sponge. It's being used as refuge by a small fish. More impact that they have, sponges provide a food source for certain species like the hawksbill turtle, the angelfish, and the parrotfish. So their toxins and spicules make them unappetizing to many animals, but some are still willing to eat them. So this is just a couple examples. And many of these animals have sharp mouth parts that allow them to actually bite into the sponge. So you can kind of see, check out this guy's mouth. He's got that like sharp front to his beak, which allows him to take a bite out of a sponge. All right, another impact on their ecosystem is that sponges have various symbiotic relationships. So, just to remind you, symbiosis is a relationship between two organisms that live in close contact with each other, and one organism at least is benefited. So sponges in no way are related to the symbiosis between the shark and remora shown on your slide. I just wanted to provide you a good example of symbiosis as we kind of introduce that. So remember, those relationships can include mutualism, which is when they both benefit, commensalism, which is one benefits, one is unaffected, or parasitism, which one benefits and the other is actually harmed. So talking about a couple of these relationships, cyanobacteria live in and on sponges. The bacteria do photosynthesis and provide nutrients for the sponge. The sponge provides a shelter for the cyanobacteria. So thinking about this, right, this would show us an example of mutualism because both organisms are benefiting from the relationship. Another one, a young male and female shrimp enter a glass sponge as the Venus flower basket. The sponge traps the shrimp inside and they grow too large to ever leave. They mate for life inside the sponge and their tiny young offspring escape to find a mate and sponge, while inside the shrimp clean the sponge. So, mutualistic relationships result in both organisms benefiting. How does the sponge benefit? How do the shrimp benefit? Hopefully you said the sponge was cleaned. That's how they benefit. And the shrimp got protection to mate and reproduce. And they also get a place for food. Crabs wear live sponges. The toxins from the sponge deter predators from them. Competition relationships. So sponges also have to compete for space with other sponges, but also with coral. So to gain an advantage, sponges produce toxins to kill or repel competitors, which kind of creates a dead zone around that sponge. Some more impacts. So human impacts one we have is cleaning. Sponges have been useful to humans as cleaning or bath sponges for thousands of years. It is unknown when exactly the sponge became a tool for human use, but some sources do estimate between 2,000 and 5,000 years ago. In ancient Greek writings, Homer, 800 or 900 BC, and Plato, born 478 BC, mentioned using sponges for washing faces and bathing. There are sources that support the notion that people in Rome would put a sponge on a stick as a public wiping device in a restroom. So, just something interesting about human impacts. Another one, sponge fishing, has many of its roots in Greece. In the United States, much of the sponge fishing occurred in Tarpon Springs, a community with a lot of that Greek heritage. More human impacts. So with cleaning again, we have greatly overfished the soft sea sponge. So most household sponges today are not sea sponges. We make synthetic sponges that are much, much cheaper, although they are also less absorbent than a natural sea sponge would be. Another human impact would be health. So the defensive chemicals in sponges are key to many life-saving medications. So we kind of talked about that a little bit ago. They can be used for things like anti-cancer drugs. So this was the first anti-leukemia drug, actually came from some of those defensive chemicals in sponges. Also, the first antiviral medication, which was approved for human use, which can combat the herpes infection, came from sponges as well. AZT was the first drug to combat HIV, and there's also some anti-inflammatory drugs that have come as a result of some of those chemicals from sponges.